Talking about peace. And before we get into the scripture, I always like to define what we're talking about when we talk about peace. So look up in the Webster's dictionary, and we look up the definition of peace. There's quite a bit on peace in the Webster's dictionary. So we're going to read through this. I think it's all very good that we understand there's many meanings of peace when we talk about peace. So we need to kind of iron all that out. First one there is a state of tranquility or quiet, such as freedom from civil disturbance, peace and order were finally restored in the town. A state of security or order within a community provided for by law or custom, a breach of the peace. Freedom from disquieting or oppressive thoughts or emotions. I have been in perfect peace and contentment. Harmony in personal relations. The sisters are at peace with each other. That's always nice when that's going on at my house. A state of period of mutual concord between governments. There was a peace of 50 years before a war broke out again. A pact or agreement to end hostilities between those who have been at war or in a state of enmity. Offered the possibility of a negotiated peace. And my favorite, at peace, in a state of concord or tranquility. The problem was settled and his mind was at peace. So there's the definitions of peace. Next for me, Scott. So what types of peace do we get from that? As you can see up there, I boiled all that, what we just read, into three types. I kind of simplified it a little bit. There's the inner peace, where we talked about a factor of, in a state of concord or tranquility in your inner peace. Peace between governments or relationships. We're not at war, or two people are not at war, however you want to look at it. Peace and quiet serenity. We're in a peaceful place. Not a lot of noise, it's real peaceful. So those are the three types of peace that I kind of broke all that into what we see. So y'all see the difference in how people use peace? It's nice to understand what we mean. Well, what we're going to be talking about today, next, Scott, inner peace. We're going to be talking about the inner peace, our peace with Christ, our peace with God, our spiritual, what's in our heart, and when we're at peace there. So, first thing I want to identify is, where does peace come from? Your scripture was perfect in telling us where it comes from. It comes from God. So let's look at Romans chapter 5, verse 1. Scott? Therefore, since we have been justified through faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. We have peace with God through who? Our Lord Jesus Christ. Understand, this all comes through our relationship. Next, Scott. 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 33. For God is not a God of disorder, but of peace, as in all the congregations of the Lord's people. Next, Scott. Job 22, verse 21. Submit to God and be at peace with him. In this way, prosperity will come to you. Next, Scott. You're doing a great job. Galatians chapter 5, verse 22 through 23. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And I love this part. Against such things there is no law. One more, Scott. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 16. Now may the Lord of peace himself give you peace at all times and in every way. The Lord be with all of you. So, peace comes from God through a relationship with Christ. So, if we don't have a relationship with Christ, should we expect peace, inner peace in our life? No. Well, unless you have a relationship, if you don't have that relationship, you're not really going to get true inner peace. It's just not going to happen. Can you see that, Anita? Is that too small for you? I checked with everybody here. But it's going to get bigger. That's the good news. They're going to get bigger.
Did you spell peace with P-I-E-C-E?
Did I spell it wrong?
Yes.
Where?
In the beginning.
I wasn't going to say anything.
That's I had to correct a lot of mine because when I'm typing, I spell it.
I was just curious.
There you go.
I probably did. I should have. And see, I should have let Anita look at it. That's what I get. That's what I get for not letting my editor in chief go over all my material.
If Google doesn't fix
I was just curious though.
I probably did.
No.
And I had to go back and change it in several places.
I can spell that, people spell my name or something like that all the time.
When I'm just typing and I'm saying it in my head, I type it P-I-E-C instead of, I don't know why. That was just the natural way to go.
You just
Thanks for
make
catching
a
that, Mike.
Piece of peace. Like peace.
Thanks for catching that, Mike.
I get called Peach, not Peach.
Peach? Oh, I didn't spell peach. I hope
No,
I didn't.
no, but I get called Peach.
I didn't spell peach. So, understand it comes through the relationship with Christ. And we're gonna talk about it a little bit. People that don't have a relationship can be at peace to a certain extent, but they're not gonna ever experience the peace that comes from Jesus. Okay, understand that. Now, next, I want everybody to think about it in their own heart, in their own spirit. I want you to ask yourself this question. Scott, see what the next one says. Let's go to the next one. Let's see where we're at. See if I do this. Yeah, hit it. There we go. What brings peace to your life? Give me a second. Think about that. What brings you peace? And once you got some things, let me know. Tell me what they are.
Well, when I'm having an anxiety attack, I usually meditate, like pray, meditate, run through my thoughts. It's almost
Prayer.
like a
Prayer
yeah.
brings you peace. Somebody else? Scripture.
And music, praise the Lord.
Worship. Anybody else have it?
Church.
Church.
Almost had brothers and sisters in the faith.
I'm sorry, Monty.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
Other brothers and sisters in the faith.
God's children. Bye. Great. All those are good. But all those things, and they're all dead on. It helps us tremendously.
One more item, just for, sometimes I get frustrated with this life. I mean, just things that go on, like, and then I gotta sit there and, when I'm in my prayer, my calmness, and even reading scripture, I get reminded that we're not long for this earth. Like, this is not
It's
our
temporary.
home.
This is all
This
temporary.
is a temporary condition. That continues. Like, this is a temporary situation.
And I'm writing this so small, Michael can't read it.
I can't either, but I.
So if I spell something, he won't come out.
I can do it.
All right. And I reflected on this a little bit, and I thought about, well, what brings me peace? All these things as well. Well, what gives me the most peace is when, for me, my family, my friends are all safe, and my church all safe and secure in God's hands, which encompasses everything we've talked about here. Now, I want to reflect back to before I started walking with Christ. I was saved at 14, but I didn't start a relationship with him until I was 33. Before then, I would have answered the question very similar, but it would have been one slight difference. I would have said, is knowing my family, my friends are safe and secure in the future. Okay? So when I'm at peace, I would be looking at, okay, is everything going to go well in the future? Calculate what's going on now, look at the future. And if it looked right, I was at peace, right? If it didn't, I wasn't. So notice a slight difference, because now it's my friends, family, church, all secure and safe in God's hands. It doesn't mean the circumstances are good. It just means they're in his hands and he's in control, regardless of the circumstances. So I just want to point out there was a big difference before I was walking with Christ and after, as I'm sure all of you can relate back to before you're walking with Christ and after as well. Now, next, Sky, what removes peace in your life?
Piece of what?
What was it? What was the other one I did?
Well,
That's supposed to be
remove that
P-E-A-C-E.
peace.
P-E-A-C-E. up here.
I couldn't resist, I'm sorry.
That's all right, no. I did, see, I fixed it here, but I didn't fix it here.
Sure.
Sky could have fixed that. I'm sure she'd caught that. I should let you look it over before, yeah. So, what removes peace in your life? Work. What'd you say, Jim?
I said God.
God. Removes peace?
Oh, he removed.
Yeah, what removes
Oh,
peace?
sorry.
What removes peace is when you get out of fellowship.
Yes, when you, yeah.
Out of fellowship.
That's what you mean.
Yes. That's what I meant. Actually, it's because
I read it
I
mine.
wrote that up,
That's very good. That's very true. Anything else? What removes peace in your life, Josh?
Distractions.
Distraction?
Not having a prayer life, no prayer.
evil.
Evil.
There's so much evil. Satan's everywhere.
How about sin?
Mhm.
Whether it's sin you're involved with or sin that's around you or whatever. Scott, what removes peace in your life? You're doing a great job.
Great.
Okay, that's very good. Now, we talked about what removes peace and what everything. Now I want us to kind of look at peace and no peace from a slightly different perspective. What are the attributes a person at peace has? How would you describe somebody at peace?
Calm.
Love?
Good luck.
In love?
They're kind.
Kind.
They're gentle.
Exactly.
They're joyful.
More patient with people.
Patience.
Not quick to be angry.
You're going to speak my hearing.
You're not quick to be angry. Like long suffering.
Not quick to anger.
Yeah. You have more self-control.
It would be-
Good, that's okay. He could spell that. I had to, I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Thanks, Mom.
Thanks,
Those are words of love.
Mom.
Okay. Perfect. How about one other thing I want to put up here? No fear.
Yeah, they're happy too.
Exactly.
They're happy when they're happy.
All right. What are some characteristics, attributes of somebody that doesn't have peace?
Lack of self-confidence.
Lack of self-acceptance.
Negative.
Very negative, Nancy.
Negative.
We may have to tell them all of that.
Many times they're angry, right?
Yeah.
Angry.
Quick temper. Yeah, angry.
Yeah.
Get depressed a lot, you know.
Self-centered.
Exactly.
Pessimistic.
That's what,
What was that, Mike?
pessimistic, which is negative.
I can't spell that. I'm not putting it up there.
This is simple thing.
And I don't know if that's spelled out.
You don't have to spell
Okay.
that one either.
I see it anyway.
I don't, I'm a little bit.
Good, good. Those are all great. Those are all great. Understand, we just talked about the difference in peace and no peace here, both on what gives you peace and no peace and some of the attributes of people. Now let me just put it in here, attributes. Over here. Which side looks like it's more fun? The peace side. Without a doubt, there's nothing positive over here. There's nothing positive about not being at peace. So I think all of us seek to be on this side at all times in everything that we do. Understand, it's all about the relationship with Christ. If you have a relationship with Christ, and you spend time with Him, and you give Him an opportunity to work in your life, the more you see Him working in your life, the more you're going to rely on Him. The more you rely on Him, the more you live in this perspective. The less you rely on Him, the more you're going to be over here. This is self perspective. This is walking in the Spirit perspective. When you're walking in the Spirit, this is what you'll be like. Okay? So now let's look at some examples of people that were at peace in the Bible. Now this is going to be a little bit lengthy, but I thought it was good to bring in all the scripture here to go through the story. First of all, we're going to go through Daniel chapter 3, 16 through 28. Scott, could you bring up the next one for me, sweetie? What are we going to do so I know what to tell her? 22. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King, let me set this up. The king had just put out a decree that everybody should bow down and worship his God and everything. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had a problem with that, and they wouldn't do it. So let's phase into what happens to them when the king comes up. 16. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude towards them changed. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual. How many times? I'm not sure why 7. 7 times hotter than usual. And commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men were wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent and the furnace so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So the ones that went up to throw them in the fire died before they even got to the fire. That's how hot it was. That's pretty hot. Sky, next one, please. And these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisor, weren't there 3 men that were tied up and threw into the fire? They replied, certainly, your majesty. He said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods. Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God. He's changed his tune. Now he said servants of the Most High God. A minute ago he wanted them to worship his God. Servants of the Most High God. Come out. Come here. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire. And the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair on their head singed. Their robes were not even scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Anybody ever been around a campfire? Raise your hand if you've been around a campfire. Or just everybody. What do you smell like after you've been around the campfire? Smoke, right? It's strong smell, right? These people were in the fire. They didn't even smell like smoke. I'll make sure we don't go too far. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own. So, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were they in a difficult situation? Were there circumstances, anything we want to be in? Were they at peace? They were in dead peace. I mean, they had no issues whatsoever. They sat there and told the king. They were even polite. Your Majesty, sorry, I can't do it. It's not going to happen. Why? They gave you the very reason. Why did they do that? Well, they said, number one, our God can protect us from this. He's big enough. They know. They had a relationship with God. They understood what he was capable of. Think about that in your own life. Do you understand? Do you have a relationship with God? Do you understand what he's capable of? And they said, even if he doesn't save us from death, that's okay too. We're still not going to worship your God. Because guess what? If he doesn't save us from death, where are we going to be? In heaven with him. We can't lose. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego treated this situation like they couldn't lose. They were at peace because they knew where they were in God's hands. Whatever he chose was best for them. So let's look at another example. Now, this is David, long before he was king. This was what we're about to read here. The Philistines had come out, and the Israel army was sitting out. They were on both sides. And this giant Goliath was coming out and mocking them. Hey, send your best soldier out. Whoever wins, if I win, we rule over you. If you win, you rule over me. Well, Goliath was this enormous person. I think he was probably 7+ foot, maybe close to 8. Huge, giant, hulk of a man, bigger than me. This guy's eyes are, woo. Bigger than Josh. He was huge. Nobody in the Israel army wanted to fight him. He was basically invincible. Nobody could kill him. He'd been fighting since he was a young man. Now let's see what happens when David shows up. 1 Samuel chapter 17, 32 through 51. Scott, would you take us to the next one, please? David said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. Saul replied, you're not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. This is key. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of the Philistines. Saul said to David, go, and the Lord will be with you. So, was David being arrogant here? No, he wasn't saying, I'm going to do it. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of the Philistines. David is not taking any credit for anything that he's done in the past. He's just explaining what God's done in his life before. So David had a clear perspective of who God was and what he's capable of and what he can do in his life. So David wasn't going to take anything off Goliath. Bring him on. God's on my side. There's nothing he can do to me. And it wasn't arrogance, because David wasn't saying, I'm great, I can do this. He was saying the Lord's great, he can do this. Big difference there. Understand that. Next for us, Scott. Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on the sword over the tunic and tried walking around, because he was not used to them. I cannot go in these, he said, Saul, because I'm not used to them. So he took them off. Now, David was a young man. Probably a little bit bigger than you, Scott. I'd say he's probably about this tall. He's walking around in a mature adult man's armor. He's probably walking like this and saying, I can't even move. He's like, I don't need any of that stuff anyway. Let's look and see what's next. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand, approached the Philistine. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over, saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, am I a dog that you come at me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Come here, he said, and I will give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals. David said to the Philistine, you come against me with a sword and a spear and a javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. Once again, David didn't back down. Does David seem like he's at peace here? He's got complete peace here. Goliath's standing there just telling him, I'm going to tear you up and feed you to the birds. He's like, no, it's going to work the other way because of my God. Where are we at here? Oh, good job. Oh, I forgot to do that. I mean, Let's look at the next one, Scott. All those gathered here will know that it is not my sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. So, I stop here and I want to say, let's read that one more time. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. This is something we all struggle. I struggle with it deeply. When we have a conflict, when we have something like Michael shared with us today, who's going to do your fighting for you? God. If you take it upon yourself to do your fighting, then who are you relying on? Yourself. Turn it over to the Lord. He's going to fight the battles. Then you see him work in your life, and you gain more and more confidence and more peace about what God will do in your life. Because when you give him the opportunity, when you let him step in, and you let him do your fighting for you, he can really work, and he shows you stuff in your life you never expected before. Your peace, your faith, everything grows through that very moment. Just like David did. And where did this come from? David had seen him do it before, right? David already had a relationship with God. God had already worked in his life in amazing ways. There was no doubt in his mind that God could and would do this. Let's go to the next one. Scott. As the Philistines moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly towards the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. David ran and stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine's sword and drew it from the sheath. After he killed him, he cut off his head with the sword. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they turned and ran. You're good right there for a second. Fine. They turned and ran. So, would David have been in this situation or had any opportunity to do what he just did had he not been at peace? David would have never even told him he was ready and willing to go out there. He would never even been there. He'd probably stayed behind and says, I'm going to see who gets whooped up by this Goliath guy. You know? But David had peace because of his relationship with God. Remember that. Peace is not possible. This type of peace, the inner peace, is not possible without a relationship with God. Now, let's look at a couple of examples of people that were not at peace in the Bible. Let's analyze that. Now, before we go to this next one, this is where, back in the day of the prophets, Jezebel was killing all of God's prophets. That was her role. She was just trying to strike them all down and kill them all. God went to Elijah and said, I want you to go to Ahab. And I want you to bring out all the Israelites. Because the Israelites had turned and started worshiping Baal. They had about 400 prophets at that point in time worshiping Baal, a different God altogether. God was not happy with this, right? So, Elijah went to Ahab, who wanted Elijah dead. But Elijah did what God said and said, hey, bring out all the Israelites. You take your prophets from Baal and you have them prepare a sacrifice. And then I'll prepare a sacrifice for my God. And then we'll let Baal start the fire for your sacrifice and God start the fire for ours. And we'll see whose God shows up. So, that's where we're at when all this. And not only did that happen, but the Baal prophets, they went and they set up their fire, they set up their pit, they put their bull or whatever they had on top of it, and then they started in the morning praying for Baal to start the fire. He didn't do nothing. He didn't do nothing. Come about lunchtime, Elijah started mocking him. Maybe your God's busy. Maybe he's got better things to do. So they kept marching around and praying. Come that evening, no fire. So Elijah said, let me show you what I can do. So Elijah went over there. He used 12 stones to build his altar for the 12 tribes of Israel. He put the wood in there. He put his sacrifice on there. And he dug a trench all the way around. And he said, okay, I couldn't start the fire now, but let's just make it a little more difficult. Why don't y'all pour water on my altar there? So they went and poured water all over the wood, all over the altar. And he just had them do it 3 times until the trench around it was full of water. So everything was soaking wet, the trench was full of water. Then Elijah prayed. He said, God, please take this sacrifice, provide the fire. God sent down fire from heaven, burned it up completely. As soon as his prayer was over, there was no hesitation. So all the Israelites saw who the one true God was. Baal never showed up. God showed up in a big way. That time, Ezekiel had all the Baal prophets killed by the sword. So remember this, Ezekiel had just had a huge victory. God had just used him in a mighty way. Now let's look and see what Ezekiel does next. Okay, next for me, Scott. 1 Kings chapter 9. Now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, may the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them. Elijah was afraid. Let me say that again. Elijah, who had just seen this major victory in his life, Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there. While he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, he came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. I've had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. So, did Elijah know what God was capable of? He sure did. He'd just seen it. He's one of God's prophets. But Elijah wasn't 100% sure of God's plan. Well, Jezebel's going to try to kill me. He didn't know whether God was going to let him die or not. So Elijah was scared of dying, right? So he ran off in fear. Does that sound like something we might do? Right after a major? Yes, it does, unfortunately, right? So it wasn't Elijah's limited belief in what God could do, but it was, I'm not sure his plan's going to save me, so I'm still afraid of dying. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they acknowledged they could die, right? And they were okay with that. Ezekiel said, I know God can do this. I mean, Elijah, I know God can do this. But will he save me? And he was still concerned about that. Whereas Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, well, you can kill us too. Either way, we're fine. Understand, it's not always just God you have to trust in to have peace. You also have to trust in his plan. In this case, Ezekiel had no peace. He was living over here because he did not trust God's plan or believe it was going to work the way he wanted it to. Now let's look at another one that had a little trouble with God's plan. Very similar situation, but slightly different. Let's look at Jonah chapter 1, verses 1 through 3. Scott. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. But Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port. After paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. Now, Jonah's problem, he knew God was capable of what he wanted to do, right? Jonah knew God was planning to save the people of Nineveh. That's why he wanted him to preach there, right? Now, for those of you that don't remember, Jonah went on to get on that ship. And they tossed him out of that ship because of the storm they were in. And Jonah told them it was because of me. The whale, or the big fish, the great fish, came and swallowed up Jonah. For 3 days he was in there until they spit him up on the shore. He was ready to do what God asked him to after he'd been in the fish for 3 days. He still didn't like it. Matter of fact, after he went and preached it, he saw him saved. He's sitting up there sulking by the tree, hating life because the Ninevites are going to be saved. There again, it wasn't Jonah's doubt in what God could do. It wasn't even different than Elijah. Jonah didn't even doubt whether his plan would work or not. He knew it would work precisely. He just didn't like it. He didn't want those people to be saved. He didn't care for them. He didn't like them. So understand, you've got to trust in God. You've got to trust in his plan. And you've got to understand, even if his plan is not what you're excited about, if you don't like it, understand He knows best. And you're far better off going with His plan than being like Jonah, trying to, let me run from it. How stupid was that? It wasn't going to work. So understand, you have to trust God. You have to trust His plan. And if you don't like His plan, you still have to follow it and say, your will, not mine, because you know better. You're the higher being. You understand the whole picture. Whatever you want to do in my life, whether I like it or not, it's what I want because your will is best. Think about where fear and anxiety come from. What is its source? Think about that. And I don't know if people really get down into it a lot, but fear and anxiety, for me, and the source I have it is, if I'm calculating what's going to happen in the future, and I see any harm coming to me, my family, or friends, and I project, I think something, I don't even know, but I believe something's going to happen, that's where fear and anxiety comes in that I don't like, right? Something bad's going to happen to somebody I know. But if you're in God's hands, even if something bad happens, you're going to be in the right place, as long as you're in His will, knowing what's going on there. Now, easier said than done, I know. But like you said, when fear and anxiety creeps up, there's only one place to go, back to the Lord. Pray and seek Him. Have Him help you understand that regardless of what you think may happen, He's in charge, and if that does happen, that's His will. Let's look at the next one for me, Sky. Romans chapter 8, verse 28. This is one of my favorite scriptures. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. If you have a relationship with Christ, if you're saved and you have that relationship, it doesn't say there, I'm going to make them comfortable. I'm going to give them great circumstances. I'm going to make them rich and famous and give them everything that their hearts ever desire. He does say, I'm going to make it all work for your good. Whether there's a storm in your life, whether there's death in your life, whether there's sickness, whether there's pain. He doesn't say that's not coming, but He says, I'm going to use it to your good. Mine. The situation you're in right now, He's not promising you that you won't have that situation, but He is promising you, I'll use it to your good. If you will focus on me, walk in the Spirit, trust me, even though you don't get the outcome you want, you're going to be better off. And that's what He's trying to tell us here. And that's a very good way to look at it. Now, for this next exercise, I'm going to need a volunteer. Michael, come on up. How did I know Michael was going to volunteer?
God's very grateful.
All right, come on up here, Michael. Can you see this? We can put it over here. Let's put it over here. Don't do anything yet. I'm just going to put this right here. Stand right here, Michael. Now, we're going to do a little exercise in peace and trust here. Don't sit down. Just stand there for a second. Now, in just a minute, I'm going to ask you to sit in that chair.
It's a slice of
But before you sit down, would you tell me, are you at peace about sitting in that chair?
No.
No? Why not? You just got out of one just like it.
I know.
He's trying to be difficult. Well, why did you sit in that chair over there?
Because I trust that chair sitting there.
Well, why did you trust that chair you were sitting in?
Because I knew it was there.
You knew it was there. Have you ever used a chair like that before?
Yes.
Have you ever seen chairs and you kind of know which ones are stable and which ones are not, and which ones are going to hold you up?
Yep.
So you had a history of experience with a chair similar to that and you were okay with it?
Yes.
Right? Okay. Hold on one second. Go ahead if you don't mind sitting in that chair for me. See? So we had a chair just like that. Okay, stand up for me, Mike. I got one more thing to do here. Hang on one second. You can turn over here and look at this, Mike. There you go. Look right here, Mike. All right. I've got, no. In a minute, I'm going to ask you to sit in this chair. But before I do, have you looked at the chair?
I saw the chair, but I didn't see it.
I looked at it.
You can turn around and look at it. You can turn around and look at the chair. Good. Are you at peace about sitting in this chair?
No.
No. Why not?
It's not stable.
It's not. Well, why do you know it's not stable?
It's been dirty and
through your experience, it just doesn't look like something you'd be at peace about sitting there.
Yes.
Right? Okay, I'm not gonna get you to sit.
I'll sit there.
No, I know you would. I know you would. But all I wanted to point out there is we have peace every day in things that we have experience with and we learn. I'm 99.9% sure this chair is not going to break. Now, has anybody ever sat in a chair that they thought was going to hold them and didn't? Josh, you can raise your hand. I've been there and done that. I know exactly how that is. But here's what I want you to understand. That's just your common sense, the gifts God's given you, gives you the ability to that. His relationship's very much like that. The more you let him work in your life, the more you see what he's capable of and what he'll do. And when he asks you to do something, you're comfortable doing it. Now, to the point of even, if he asks you to sit in that chair, and you don't think it's going to hold you up, once you have the correct relationship with it, and once you're 100% at peace with it, you're willing to sit in that chair because he asked you to. Not because you think it's going to hold you up, because you know even if you fall to the floor, that was his will. And his will's better than your will. So even though you didn't want to sit in that chair and fall to the floor, God may have wanted you to. There's a purpose behind it. Does that make sense? Sky, would you have sat in that chair? Would you have sat in that chair? Huh? All right. So understand, it's all about the relationship. It's all about the experience. But understand, even if we don't like where the Lord's taking us and what his will says in our lives, we still need to obey and listen to him because it's better for us. Anybody ever have parents tell you to do anything when you were younger that you shouldn't do? And tell you not to do something, you did it anyway? Did any of you pay the price for that? Yeah. We found out the hard way that they knew what they were talking about, right? God has a reason for everything he's doing in your life. You can trust him. You have that relationship. If you spend time with him, if you let him show you that he's going to take care of you and he's got you in his hands, even if the circumstances don't go your way, you can still be at peace in the middle of that. One thing I want to address right here that we so often try to lead people to believe, can we muster inner peace? Can we just create it? Can we wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to be at peace today? No, we can't do it. It comes from God, and it comes from a relationship. Now, we can go back to David. He was at peace, and he was solid with Goliath. Give him a few years when he's in the cave. Totally different David. David's not 100% comfortable with God's plan at that point. He doesn't know what's going to happen. So David is cowering and afraid and in anxiety. Look at many of the Psalms. He wrote those when he's out there crying out to the Lord. He was not the same David. So understand, don't expect to just be naturally at peace. It comes from a relationship with Christ. And it comes from being willing to say yes, even though we don't like what he's asking. If he asks you to do something and you say no, you're not going to be at peace. I'll promise you. Look at David. A lot of his life, some of the stuff that he did, he was not at peace. Yet, you saw that episode right there. David was one of the strongest individuals on this earth when he believed in God and everything he was doing. We can all have that peace if we believe in that. All right. Let's go back to the board here. And let's Scott, can you give me the next one? Let's see if I spelled things right. No, I didn't. We're about to see another message.
You did that.
All right. No, that's not. Can you go back one, Scott? Go back forward. Go back to where you were. And one more. No, back up two. All right, I didn't write this one out, but we're going to do this one on the board. Before we get to that, what happens to a person and how does their life pan out if they have peace? What do you see in people that have peace? What do they do in life? What types of life do they carry on? One, they're fearless, right? You see them fearless?
They're optimistic.
They do things for others.
Optimistic. They're servants.
They're zealous for life.
What's that?
They're zealous for life.
Zealous?
Z-E-A-L.
I'm not
They
right.
have
Very
very
good.
good.
Very good, Michael.
And you'll see most of these people are very successful. And I don't mean that success in money and fame and fortune, but whatever they go after, whatever they're doing, they're successful at it. And it may be missionary work, it may be something in the church, but most of these people that have complete peace, all these attributes, but they're very successful in the path God puts them on.
They're
They're
go-getters.
overcomers, yeah. They can overcome obstacles with a.
Overcoming, that's the way. All right? What if somebody lives with no peace? What does their life turn out to be like? They're usually secluded, right? Many of them are to the point where they're so anxiety affects them so much, they try not to go out in public.
They can cause trouble.
Or they can anger, they can have
Yes.
anger, they can go the other direction.
Right. One or the other.
They can be completely selfish and try to go show or put everybody else down so that they look
Trying
better.
to get things through. Exactly.
Now, these people, by and large, walk through life never achieving God's full potential because they limit themselves. Very much so.
They're self-centered.
Yes, self-centered. But many times they live in fear. They're afraid, I think, is the way. They never accomplish much because they're afraid to put themselves out there and afraid to be in a position where they can be for others.
You know, being
These people over here don't mind the thing. That's okay. Right?
without peace can cause you to be physically sick.
Exactly. Yes.
Physical and mental.
Stress, right? Stress is what they call that when you're sick because you're not at peace because you got too much stress. That's the way the world puts it, right? So, let me tell you a little bit about the differences in my walk. And there's some. When I was saved at 14, but I went to school at the University of Georgia. I graduated and went to work at Georgia Pacific. I was there for 18 years doing different things. I was in IT for the most part. In those 18 years, pretty much from the day I got there, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always wanted to do something, go to business for myself. But I never had the courage to do it. I got a good job here. This is working out fine. Never had the courage to go step out there and do that. Well, by the time I became 33, I started walking with the Lord. He started to do some amazing things in my life. About that time, there was a situation come up where I was a senior manager running a group very similar to a director who ran a very similar group. They were merging the two. Well, they only needed one of us going forward. They didn't need two people to manage both groups. So we were both on the chopping block. That didn't feel very good. So I started praying about it and it worked out. They kept me. Why? It was real simple. This was a really good guy. He was a very hard worker, very successful. He was a director, I was a senior manager, which meant he was higher up than me and made more money than me. From a business perspective, it was better to get rid of him, keep the cheaper guy. Had nothing to do with me being great or anything like that. So I was saved by sheer luck in that situation. Well, I'm sure God had a hand in it too. But what that taught me was, what do I really want to do? I want to be prepared. I don't want to be in a situation where I just wait for this to happen to me again. I want plan B to be on the table before I need plan B. It just showed up and I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to go figure out what plan B. So I prayed about it. I was walking with the Lord. He put ACE on and just put it out there. I started researching. I prayed about it. I said, Lord, this seems like a possibility. And I was really slow, dragging my feet. I made one phone call. Next thing you know, whirlwind was going on. I was being drugged down the path of being an ACE hardware owner. And I told the Lord, I said, okay, I'm not comfortable with this, but I'm going to trust you. If you keep opening these doors, if this is the path you want me to go through, we'll accomplish it. We'll go through there. But I also knew in my heart, this may not be so that I could become an ACE hardware owner and be successful. This very well could have been to move me to a different place with Christ. And then I was going to end up doing something completely different. I may have lost everything, done all that, started over somewhere else. I knew both of those were options, and I didn't. He hadn't given me the complete, he just said go down this path. He didn't say it's going to be successful or not, right? So I made the decision. I'm going to step off this cliff with God. He's got me either way. Either this will be successful or it's not. would have never done that without a relationship with God and being at peace about making that decision. Not because I knew it was going to work out like I wanted it to, because I knew I was in God's hands. And no matter what happened, and we couldn't, I prayed it wouldn't, but I knew, clearly understood in my life, making God the center of your life. Surrendering to Him means He's got the choice of either taking you somewhere to be successful or taking you somewhere to be a failure. And then whatever's next is next. He could have used that in my life, and I was willing to do that. So that was the difference when I was walking with the Lord before. I would never had enough peace in my life to do that. But as soon as I was walking with Him, He gave me the peace, and I could trust Him, and I knew I could trust Him to make those decisions. Now, turned out He's kept adding new Ace Hardware stores since then. But every one we do, we're doing a new store in Madison. I'm the same way. I prayed about it. I feel like that's where the Lord wants us to go. That's where He wants us to do. But I understand it may not work out. And I understand I'm in His hands. I wake up every day believing I could be on the street tomorrow. But that's okay if I'm in His hands. And that's the way I live. So, how do we keep the peace once we have the peace? Through a relationship with Christ. I can't hammer this home anymore. Only way we're going to know Him, the only way we're going to trust Him, the only way we're going to believe in Him, the only way we're going to let Him have the reins even if we don't like where we're going, is if we have a relationship with Him. Next, Scott. Exercise the faith we were given by God to trust that we are in His hands and God will take care of us in one way or another. I tell this to my girls all the time in softball. I don't know if they really understand it. But they're both pitchers, older and younger. And you're out there in the circle, and you start every play that there ever is. Every eye on that field is on you before every play happens. And they're counting, and the defense is counting on you to make a good pitch, and the offense is hoping you don't, so they can hit the ball and go. There's a lot of pressure in that circle. I tell them it's not about the results of the game. All their job is to work hard, prepare, go out there, practice like they should practice, do everything they should do 100%. And then when they get in that circle, enjoy the game. Do their very best. Trust God. It's not always going to be a good day. Thank Him for the bad days too, because He gave you those for a reason, just like He gave you the good days. Because He's going to, Romans 8:28, He's going to work it all to our good. Understand there's work He has to do in your life. Sometimes that requires failure. Be okay with failure. Be okay if God takes you to failure. That's okay. Don't live in fear, whatever it is. Next. Walk in the Spirit, not in the flesh. And we put a lot of attributes up here, but I will say this. If you look at your flesh, basically listen to your body's desires and wishes and wants. Sky, you ever want sugar when it's not a good idea for you to have sugar, candy, cakes? Yeah, you eat too much of it, what happens? You get sick. That's exactly right. That's listening to yourself. And if you eat too much to get sick, then you focused on self and you gave self exactly what you wanted, and you get exactly what self deserves. No peace. Okay? So if you want to live by self, Pinocchio, you've seen the movie Pinocchio, Scott? What about Robin Hood? No? We'll have to get you to see. When you go, Pinocchio goes to this island after his nose grows. He runs away with some friends. And he goes to this island where they can do anything they want, and have as much fun as they want to, and there's no adults around telling them what to do. And they all regret it towards the end. It's really bad because they had so much fun, it cost them in a big way. So understand, if you want to live by self, this is the way to live. If you want to live by walking in the Spirit, which means you're focused on Christ, His will, not yours, even if you don't like it, His will, this is what you'll have. So let's look at one more, Scott, before we close it out. Isaiah 32, chapter 32, verses 17 through 18. The fruit of that righteousness will be peace. Its effect will be quietness and confidence forever. My people will live in peaceful dwelling places, in secure homes and undisturbed places of rest. God desires to give us peace. Always has, always wants to. But if we focus on flesh, what flesh wants. We're gonna live a life of anxiety, a life of no peace. All of this stuff is gonna be part of it. Now, don't get me wrong. None of us are gonna be at peace every day. We all sin, right? We all fall short. We are all gonna be selfish at times. But when you see that coming on, use that as an opportunity to realize that's a fact. I need to run back to the Lord, and I need to just lean into Him. I need to grab Him and hold on for all I got, because that's the only way I'm getting out of this. And that's where we regain our peace, going back to Him. And then He restores us over and over. And over a long period of time, we gain more and more strength that way through His peace and through our relationship with Him. So, in closing, we must first accept Christ as our Savior. And we have to learn through our relationship with Christ, as He works in our lives, we can trust Him to take care of us. He will give us that peace if we focus on Him and in the Spirit. If we focus on self, we restrict the work He can do in your life. Then we need to learn that we can trust His plan even if we don't agree with it. This is one of the hardest things for most of us Christians. Ah, Lord, I know you want me to go over here and do that, but that's just not on my agenda. Well, this is what you're asking for. You're going to the island of Pinocchio. And it's going to be fun for a while. Pretty soon it's going to be a disaster. It's just the way it works out. Peace comes from God. You can't create it, but you can learn as Christ works in your life. You can trust Him no matter what. You can be willing to sit in that ratty chair out there, knowing if it breaks, that's okay. If it holds you up, that's okay. Because you're in His hands, and that's the only place it really matters. Where you're at is in His hands. Now, trust God, trust His plan. Trust that His plan is the best. Now, how do we do all that? And I know I sound like a broken record, especially for those in Bible study. This is the outline. Spend time in His Word. Regularly. I would say every day, but none of us achieve that. Try every day. Try every day. Spend time in His Word. If I don't start out my day with His Word, I don't feel like I'm right. It's just wrong. It just doesn't feel right. Spend time in prayer with Him. Notice I didn't say spend time praying to Him, because in prayer with Him is a two-way thing. I'm good at talking, I'm not good at listening. Spend time in both directions. Talk to Him, be silent, and listen. He'll communicate back different ways for different people. Give Him the opportunity to reply. Give Him the opportunity to work in your life. Seek His will, even if you don't like it. Seek His will in this situation, right? Because He's got something good for you there. It's there for a reason. He allowed it, right? It's there for a reason. Spend time with His children, other Christians. I can't tell you the number of people God's used in my life to share messages with me through other people, with them just telling me what He's doing in their lives. The miraculous. Something He wanted to communicate with me came through those discussions. Spend time with other Christians in church, not just on Sundays, throughout the week. Spend as much time as you can. And that doesn't mean ignore the world. We've already talked about that. He wants us to be in the world and a part of the world, but you need to be around other Christians. So, with that, I'm going to close this in prayer. Let me pray. Heavenly Father,